parking lot getting ready to go in and buy some stuff. And I was thinking of a couple of things that I wanted to share in response to. There's quite a few questions that I've gotten from people recently, and some things that I think are relevant and useful to those questions as they relate to internal arts, and then also things that have actually been quite beneficial and useful for me in my own experience. And I think are things that can save a lot of people a lot of time and energy and a lot of wasted effort and a lot of unnecessary pain and suffering. So I'm going to break it down into, I guess, the advice category in terms of what is beneficial and useful, and then also talk about the second thing, which is what people tend to focus on, which tends to go in the wrong direction and develop the wrong qualities, the wrong traits, and really hold a lot of people back from even getting their foot in the door and even making any progress. So I'll say what people tend to focus on, understandably so, but erroneously so, is their feelings and sensations. So, what I mean is, people will get into a practice or some type of thing and have an experience, quote unquote. I felt this moved, this tingled, this was hot, this was cold, I saw things, I heard voices. Fill in the blanks of all manner of different sensations and feelings and subjective temporary experiences. Firstly, those are usually just occurring because someone's nervous system is already in a little bit of a hyperactive state. So when they put their awareness on this hyperactive thing, then they experience the hyperactivity, and that's mostly all that it is, the vast majority of the time. Obviously, there are a whole catalog of correct experiences and correct sensations that are confirmatory of developing in a certain direction, but actually, they're still not very important. But that's what pretty much everyone focuses on. The idea being that when we, as human beings, we interact with the world in our default way, which is through our feelings, emotions, and through mental abstraction. So if we're going to go into some arena that's based on self-improvement or development or cultivation or spirituality or internal arts, and we're going to use those tools, it's kind of a contradiction of terms because we're doing the thing that's causing our problem, thinking that it's going to lead us to the solution, which doesn't really make sense. It's like saying, I'm holding my head underwater because I think I'm going to be able to breathe. Or I'm laying in a sauna with the temperature turned all the way up because I think it will cool me down. It's just a contradiction of terms. There's there's nothing to it, which is why people tend to not not develop actual skills and not have the set of experiences and qualities that I'm going to talk about in the second piece that are actually more important and what's useful and what's relevant and are actual metrics of progress. So, depending on a person's level of sensitivity or how hyperactive their nervous system is, that will determine to a large degree the experiences that they have. So what happens is the vast majority of the time is really anxious, somewhat unhealthy people get interested in spirituality or something, right? So they sit down and they close their eyes and they go inside, and all of a sudden it's feel this, I feel that, this is doing, this thing is tingling, all these sensations, right? Or maybe they read a bunch of books. They're very cerebral. So then they go inside and they basically just experience whatever's in their cerebral database. And then they come out of it thinking, oh, I had an experience. I felt this thing. So that must be good. It's not. It's just It's literally just what it is. Just in the same way, if I close my eyes right now, even just thinking about it, I'm getting more relaxed, right? That doesn't mean anything other than I'm closing my eyes and I'm getting more relaxed. That's it. That's all it means. That's all it is. Like if I go to the gym and I lift weights and my biceps get bigger, it doesn't mean anything other than my biceps are getting bigger, because that's it. It's just simple sort of cause and effect. So the point I'm trying to get at is that these systems, these disciplines, these things actually have different cause and effect relationships, different mechanics. And if we're not actually doing those mechanics, then we're not even doing the thing remotely, even approximating it. So I just wanted to clarify that, because that's really what a lot of people get hung up on. Because when they start training or doing these things, it's so, oh, I felt this. Oh, this happened. What is this? What does this mean? Or people will think, oh, I felt some tingling in my abdomen and it moved down my arms. So that means my channels are open and my dantian's activated and all this type of thing. And it's like, no, it just means that your awareness went inside and you felt some tingling. That's all it means. And I say this because part of it is just, it's part of being a beginner. Like, sure, it's part of human nature. This is the human condition. I'm not disparaging anyone or putting anyone down. It's just the human mind. That's it. um, the thing is that what happens is you will see many people online or in different forums, different groups, speaking about having these experiences and using certain language that they heard or read somewhere, and then thinking that it's the same thing. But then anyone at a certain degree of experience can look at them and know for a fact those causal mechanics are not in place, and it's actually completely impossible that they would be in place, because certain things you have to actually get from a teacher, or your teacher has to turn it on. It has to put the key in the ignition and turn it on. It's not necessarily something you just figure out because you've decided you thought you figured it out. Because usually what that comes down to is people are just wanting to feel special. Which, when you get into these get into these arenas, that's mostly what it comes down to, is people wanting to feel special, people wanting to repair their self-image, get some sort of validity and purpose or self-esteem, which is fair. Again, it's the human condition, it's the human mind. It just has nothing to do with actually developing skill or progressing in a particular discipline or art. Like, literally nothing to do with it. Because the idea is that to actually put your foot in the door of the qualities required for certain arts, actually all that subjective personality stuff would be really quieted down and would be really so far in the background, and would ideally be at a place of neutrality that it's not really even an issue. It's like if I put on a shoe that is the wrong size, if it's way too small, it's going to be really uncomfortable and it's going to be front of my awareness. Or I'm just going to numb out to it, but it's going to disturb my body and we're going to have all this subconscious discomfort. But if my shoe is comfortable, I eventually just put it on and I don't worry about it and I forget about it and I go about with my life. Sense of self and personality is kind of similar, in the sense that if it's kind of functional and useful, it's not really in front of our awareness. It's just sort of, we're living and it's comfortable. But if something's really wonky or distorted about it, it's always front of center of awareness. Which, if you think about it, people that get into these arenas, usually they're very well versed at talking about themselves. All the therapies they did, all the teachers they trained with, all the experiences they had, the criteria, the certifications, the training programs, the healers they went to, the spiritual journeys, the psychedelic journeys, all their traumas, all their issues, all their past lives, all their chakra imbalances, astrology, like just this whole thing that is just showing that their sense of self is clearly a bit wonky, which is why they're so fixated on it and why they're dedicating their lives to trying to remedy it. So, yeah, there's that. I could keep going on this point, but I think that should be sufficient. The The second piece to what I want to say is what is actually important, what is actually useful, and what it really actually comes down to. And I would say the first thing is just stop reading books, stop guzzling information, stop reading things that are probably just not helping whatsoever. Why I say that is because usually that is just disassociation under a different umbrella. This excessive mental, uh, like stimulus, this excessive mental craving and addiction is more or less just a hyperactive nervous system, and again, some kind of uh, usually disassociation. An example would be, oh, I read this book by this mystic, and he talked about how we can't really know life, and it's the great unknowable, and life's this great mystery. 99% of the time, that is often an excuse for someone to just be incompetent. Like, okay, it helps you feel comfortable about being ineffective at life and not being able to solve problems and not being able to process and sort through information in a meaningful, useful way. Because I can tell you, there's a lot of people that know a lot of things, and there's a lot of things about life that we can know. And if that person that did write that was an actual mystic, they're speaking about something that's so far beyond our human experience. For example, if someone's a genuine mystic in this way, they're able to sit in meditative states for months on end without issue because their physiological functioning stops. It goes into stasis, so they can exist in a meditative state for months. So I'm assuming that no one listening to this podcast can even remotely come close to that. And if people will say like, "Oh no, I meditate." Okay, if you meditate, do your physiological functions stop completely? Your breathing, your heart rate, everything stops. Okay, if it doesn't, then you're probably not in meditation. That's not necessarily my opinion. That's just what the classics and all the teachers and all the legitimate mystics and people have been saying forever and been describing. It's in all the classical texts, it's in everything. But people now are like, well, no, I close my eyes and I feel calm, slightly calm for 90 seconds, or I close my eyes and I tripped balls, so I'm meditating. No, you're not. Like, you're doing something else. At which case, a person can just say, oh, all the traditions are wrong and I know better. And at which point, I would say that's like one of the most profound levels of arrogance that I've ever heard. But people will think I'm arrogant for just repeating what traditions have said, which I'm not going to try to solve that Rubik's Cube of whatever that is. That people can, more smarter people than me can go figure that out for themselves. But personally speaking, that's not really how I think it's useful to engage. So that's kind of the first thing I would say. Just stop. Just figure out how to be a more effective human being because all this mystical, spiritual stuff, it's not creating effective human beings. It's creating more handicapped individuals the vast majority of the time, and empowering people with more degrees of emotional coercion and manipulation on themselves first and foremost. But of course, do whatever you want. If you want to be entertained, it's fun, whatever. I'm just giving you my opinion, my 2 cents. You can throw it away or discard it as at your leisure. Because why I say that, this is the important part, is because the people who arrived at those things, it wasn't from books. A huge piece of them arriving at those things is they actually went through the processes described in the classical things, which then turned them into the kind of person that by default saw things in that way. They didn't just wake up and decide, oh, I'm spiritual now. Oh, I took a drug. Oh, now I'm special. No, they arduously dedicated their entire existence to one particular focus, completely transformed every single aspect of their organism from gross to subtle levels, and then arrived at a certain place as a as the kind of person, as the object that by default sees things in that particular way. A big piece of that is simply going through all of the stages to actually contact, build chi, open the channels, etc., and then build enough to a certain degree that actually reshapes the organizing fields of your body, which then reshapes your mind and reshapes basically everything about you by default without you having to mentally really do anything. And then as a result of those shapes, you have certain qualities, certain perceptions, etc. as a result of a bunch of work and clear processes, not because of any mental or emotional or psychological mechanism. So that's why I said at the very beginning, people are chasing the wrong mechanisms. They're chasing the wrong things, which is why they're not producing results. They're not necessarily even progressing. They maybe get more adept at stressing themselves out and then develop more justifications for that skill set, but that's something different, which I mean, as free humans, it's our free choice to do that, but that's a different thing. And to me personally, I prefer not that. I've done it, I've tried it, it's not enjoyable, it's not that productive, and it doesn't produce the results that you would want, which is some of the results that that come to mind that are actually useful indicators would be, simply speaking, a person would change pretty dramatically who they are, what they are, how they see things, how they live their life, how they function. Like their entire mental sphere would change, their emotional makeup would change, their physiology would absolutely change. The way their body actually looks would be different. The way their body functions would be different. Their level of health would go way up. Their overall energy levels way up. Strength, vitality, endurance, way up. Intelligence, mental clarity, self-awareness. So many different measurable, easily observable things would go way, 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 way up. Because if we're talking about self-development, self-cultivation, building actual energy in the body, healing the body, moving our sense of self away from the subjective personality closer to something higher, maybe our soul or our spirit, then that necessitates and implies all of the things that I just described, which is ironically what every skilled teacher has said and basically described. So personally speaking, I think that is more useful. Why I say that is because I see a lot of people having a lot of experiences and a lot of feelings and a lot of sensations, and I can observe them over a decade, and they are literally the same exact person, asking the same questions, thinking the same things, stuck in the same stuff, doing the same things. Their body is the same. Everything about them is the same. Nothing has changed. But they're like, oh, well, I had this experience, so I must be advanced. Oh, I felt this thing, so I must be advanced. And again, I don't say this to be mean or disparaging. I say this because it's the human condition. We're all doing it to certain degrees all the time. The human mind can be great, and it can also be really ridiculous. I don't know if you've noticed this about life in the world. Like humans can be quite ridiculous. Personally, I mean, maybe it's just me, but I can look back at my life and see a lot of really goofy, ridiculous things that I've done, and a lot of, let's just say, lessons that maybe could have been prevented, maybe could have been avoidable, had I had better information at that time.